Hey everybody, this is Curtis Blaze from SacNews.com. I'm sitting here with Adam Ledford, City Administrator of Sac City, Iowa. Recently they have issued a notice saying that they are going to, loan the proceeds of bonds that they're selling to Loring Hospital for the purpose of refunding the outstanding principal amount of issuers $10 million, and it's going to be in the amount $11,500,000. Tell me a little bit about this. First of all, is the language in here just boilerplate, or do these numbers mean what they say?
Well, if you look at these numbers and you compare them to the numbers that were recently presented both as part of the public hearing back in 2007 and then formally approved later on in both 2007 and roughly January of 2008, the numerical amounts are predominantly the same. As you would anticipate, the initial principal amounts would have gone down slightly since they were originally issued back in late 2007, early 2008.
Okay.
Because the hospital, of course, be paying on them since then.
Sure. And is that amount indicated in this notice?
Generically.
Generically.
Yes. Because probably the best way to explain that is that the principal amount will generically be included in there. Won't be included in there would be the overall cost of the bond, because the interest, of course, would be based upon what they're selling the bond at that particular time.
Okay, let's go away from the notice right now and just
Sure.
just talk real life.
Mm-hmm.
The council's going to be you're going to have a hearing
In late September, yes.
in late September to take comments about this project. What's the council actually going to be asked to pass?
What the council is going to be asked to do is, upon completion of a public hearing, they're going to be asked to pass a resolution. And that resolution will allow for the hospital, as a 501c3 organization, to use the city's debt capacity capabilities in order to borrow or bond, in this case, money towards the purposes of paying for their project.
Okay,
Now,
how much capacity does the city have right now?
well,
to give out, let's say.
Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because we can only borrow for our own purposes up to 5% of the value, which sits in the neighborhood of roughly, let's just use the number, $3 million.
Now, $3 million is the 5%, or $3 million
Correct.
is okay. $3 million is
Now,
5%.
in this type of case, where we are not going to be using taxpayer dollars to pay this back because the debt is transferred over to the bank, the city doesn't carry a liability responsibility, so it's not limited to that 5% rule. What happens in this case is, and I was incorrect at something I said at the last council meeting. I had mentioned the fact that this would go off of our books, convert off of our books at the end of the fiscal year. I was corrected by Dorsey and Ritney that it actually goes off our books at the end of a calendar year. So what would happen ideally in this process is that they will process the bonds in October or early November. Sometime in the month of October and November, they'll sell this bond. Once they sell it, as of December 31st, this rolls off the city's books and shows fully up as part of the hospital. It doesn't show up in our books anymore as a debt limitation. So we could bond ourselves without any restriction upon our own bonding capacity as of January.
Now, what sort of liability does the city have when you do something like this? What if Loring Hospital defaults?
Well, of course, there are what Dorsey and Whitney assures us. And understand, the hospital has quite a bit of financial asset among itself. But what is the risk here is purely I would say, without talking to the attorney right here and talking with him right now, you would have the cost associated with processing the bonding. That would be the cost. Now, that is in the neighborhood of $5,000, and I would be surprised if the hospital has not already paid that processing fee.
Okay.
And of course, they would be responsible for it, so it would be something that would be liable against them. The agreement is not with the city.
Okay.
The city is only a pass-through as Similar to some of these grant projects where the city acts as the fiscal agent, in a form or fashion, this is a similar scenario where
Well,
the city serves as a fiscal agent for a third party.
That's an element I wanted to address quick.
Sure.
The Dorsey and Whitney, they're gonna sell the bond.
Yep. Well, actually, Dorsey and Whitney does not sell the bond. Dorsey and Whitney is a bonding attorney.
Okay.
There is a third party that will be involved in this, or I guess I should say a fourth party that will be involved in this, and that will be the bond selling agent.
Okay. Well,
They will
generically, the
sell-
bond selling agent will sell the bond.
Correct.
That money will go to the City of Sac City.
No, it will go to the. Well, in
Well,
this case,
you mentioned that it has to pass through.
In this case, what it will do is it will pay off the original bond, because remember, this is simply a refinancing of a bond. In essence, buying a bond
In the
to
amount
sell
of
a
10
bond.
million?
No, they had the ability to go up to that amount,
Okay,
but they
got
did
it.
not use that amount originally. And since this is only for an amount to cover what was the original principal amount, they'll be basically what's happened is that the cost of bonds today, the interest rate on bonds today, is much more favorable to the bond issuing agent or the bond issuing entity than it was in 2007. So what they're looking at is they'll be able to sell off their existing bond, let's say in the neighborhood of 4.5%, and get it down into the neighborhood of possibly in the neighborhood of 2 to 3%. So of course the interest rate
Saving
that they're
significant
paying
amounts of money.
would be a significant
Okay.
amount of money.
Back to walking through this. The
Sure.
bond selling agent is going to sell the bond. They're going to have the money.
They process the bond.
The money then goes to.
It will probably, in this case, and of course, this is a question for Dorsey and Whitney. It will probably be issued. They will turn around and immediately probably use that money to call in the previous bond and pay on the previous bond.
Okay. Does it?
Because remember, the only amount they're going to sell is enough to pay back the principal of the previous.
Because they're
in
refinancing
essence,
essentially.
So in essence, the proceeds are then going to be turned around and used to pay off the existing bond, and all that's done through this this bonding agent.
Okay. Well, at what point does it pass through the city?
It only passed through as a paper process.
I understand that,
on
but
our side.
it still comes on the books and then goes off the books.
Correct.
Okay.
If you looked on our books, it would show an indebtedness for a period of 3 months, roughly.
Okay. And that's going to be this period of time between now and the beginning.
And of course, it acknowledges within the indebtedness that it's based upon a 501c3 organization, and so therefore that direct liability does not fall on the heads of the city itself.
Okay. Why doesn't the liability fall on the heads of the city itself within those 3 months?
My understanding is that, and of course this all comes from Dorsey and Whitney, that this is all provided for, this process is all provided for under Chapter 419 of the State Code. That this process...
There's just a law that says that the city is not liable.
Correct.
With this particular type of transaction.
Correct.
And we're completely trusting Dorsey and Whitney to make that accurate.
Dorsey and Whitney, not to give them any certain credit here, other than to say that they are the paramount attorneys of practice when it comes to any type of governmental activity in the state of Iowa.
Okay. I've got basically 2 more questions here.
Sure.
One, do you have any idea what the amount's going to be?
The exact amount? No. They will give us that when they are ready for the final step.
They are?
Dorsey and Whitney.
Okay. Where does Loring Hospital get involved in this?
I expect that they will be at the public hearing.
Okay. That would be the interim director?
Either him or somebody representing
Someone from
the
the
board,
board.
I would assume.
Okay. Well, and then the last question I would really have on this would be, how come the SacNews.com Inc. can't come get $11 million tomorrow then?
Well, I believe under what I've been told, under Chapter 419 of the of State Code, it does limit the types of 501c3 organizations that actually qualify to use this practice.
I understand.
Because another example that I was asked about was about churches, for instance.
Sure.
And
Well, what about something like a chamber? I'm joking, but what about something like the chamber or something like, another 501c
Well, and to answer your question as best I can without suggesting you could talk
Sure.
with Dorsey and Whitney during the public hearing, would be to tell you that in my short conversations with Dorsey and Whitney, the 501c3 organizations that were actually referenced to me were organizations, for instance, like churches, was used as a reference material. But I don't have a totally encompassing understanding of exactly which organizations can and cannot be qualified under the 501c3. Sure, this has as much to do with economic development allowances as it has to do with anything else.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for the chat, Adam. This has been Curtis Blaze for the SacNews.com. I was speaking with Adam Ledford, City Administrator of Sac City, explaining the upcoming hospital facility revenue refund bond issue that's coming up in late September. Thank you.